All hands on deck for the elections, but really the feds seem to think the hacking problems will be small and manageable. The information ops might be another thing. Flashpoint sees Mirai losing its mojo in a black market correction. Users in Turkey flee censorship into Tor. Operation Hyperion shuts down a lot of dark web nastiness. Tesco fraud investigations continue. And, Your Honor, the plaintiff pleads bad writing. Time to take a moment to tell you about our sponsor, CyberSec Jobs. If you're an information security professional seeking your next career or your first career, check out cybersecjobs.com and find your future. CyberSec Jobs is a veteran-owned career site and job fair company for information security professionals and students. If you're a job seeker, you can create a profile, upload your resume, and search and apply for thousands of jobs. And if you're a recruiter, it's great for you too. If you're looking to source information security professionals, you should contact CyberSec Jobs about their flexible recruitment packages designed to meet your needs. To learn more, visit cybersecjobs.com. That's cybersecjobs.com. And we thank CyberSec Jobs for sponsoring our show. I'm Dave Bittner in Baltimore with your CyberWire summary for Tuesday, November 8th, 2016. As the U.S. elections proceed, the federal government is simultaneously said to have all hands on deck against hacking and to not really be that worried about this whole hacking thing. The story is more complex than contradictory, however. The hacking officials aren't too worried about would be widespread direct compromise of voting systems in ways that could directly manipulate the U.S. elections results, essentially industrial-scale voter fraud. This indeed seems relatively unlikely. U.S. voting is run by the states with heavy participation by local governments, and that system is sufficiently disparate and not coordinated to give it a certain built-in, if not entirely intentional, resistance to widespread centralized fraud. On the other hand, it's worth noting that both Cylance and Symantec have shown that hacking various voting machines is clearly feasible. Like most of the rest of the stuff that touches the internet, voting machines weren't designed with this kind of cybersecurity in mind. Most observers see the principal threat as Russian information operations directed toward eroding public trust and confidence in the vote, with data deception and denial following in their train. The U.S. intelligence community has publicly attributed hacks of political networks, most notably that of the Democratic National Committee, to the Russian government. President Putin hasn't been shy about characterizing American democracy as a mess, complete with taunts asking whether U.S. allegations of Russian influence operations means that the Americans now think of themselves as a banana republic. His words, not ours. We have no beef against bananas or any other healthy produce. Many analysts think that if his goal was to bring discredit to the U.S. political system, Mr. Putin can already chalk up at least a preliminary victory. The data deception and denial Wired magazine calls out as the other significant risk would probably involve denial of service operations, social media trolling, and interference with journalistic coverage of the election, especially reporting of results. Some such activity could be state-directed, or it could be merely state-inspired, or even just criminal activity taking advantage of the conditions surrounding a high-profile event. Some of the probes of voter databases U.S. authorities hint they've seen appear to be of the third criminal variety. As far as denial of service attacks are concerned, both Democratic and Republican presidential campaign sites sustained Mirai-driven distributed denial of service campaigns yesterday, but to little effect. Not only was it a bit late in the game to be hitting party sites, with due allowance made for whatever ground game the parties had in mind, but Mirai seems to be losing its mojo. Flashpoint researchers tell us that this is because the widespread availability of the Mirai botnet-hurting malware source code has caused its botnets to fracture. Essentially, there are more aspiring bot masters trying to stampede the webcam and home router bots against their chosen targets, but there aren't enough bots to go around. So again, the black market functions like a market. It's supply and demand. CrowdStrike, the well-known cyber threat intelligence company, is among those who attributed the DNC hacks to Fancy Bear and Cozy Bear. We spoke with CrowdStrike's Dan Larson about threat actors, what motivates them, and why it's better to be proactive than reactive.
If you look over the last 3 years, we've seen an incredible uptick in the number of private organizations and governments that are experiencing breaches. Kind of an emerging trend that we're starting to see, you can see it as part of the election, actually, is this strategic leaking of documents for the purpose of either political gain or private economic gain. And that notion of breaching an organization as a means to an end rather to being the end itself is kind of the alarming trend that we're seeing and that we're working to put to an end.
When you talk about the difference between proactive and reactive cybersecurity, what are you talking about there?
I think many of us in cybersecurity are used to this model where something bad happens, a researcher then analyzes that event and produces something like a virus signature or an IOC and then deploys that. And the problem with that whole model is that you're looking in the rearview mirror, right? It assumes it starts with something bad happening, and then you do some research to overcome it and prevent it in the future. But that model needs to change. And in order to get to proactive, what we believe at CrowdStrike is you need to be actively monitoring the adversaries out there, understanding how they do what they do, what is their trade craft. And if you're successful in understanding those things, you're able to build preventative measures so that from a technology perspective, you're able to put in place countermeasures that will prevent the initial infection from happening in the first place. I think one of the great misconceptions for a lot of businesses is they say, we're too small to be targeted, right? These targeted attacks are only happening to big name corporations. Or political entities and that sort of thing. And that is simply not true. In our own customer base, we have customers who have experienced breaches that are 10 to 20 employees, and then, of course, the multinationals. And the bottom line is, if you have enough intellectual property to justify creating a business that employs people and is relevant in the economy, those are the exact same conditions that make you an interesting target for a lot of the cyber adversaries.
That's Dan Larson from CrowdStrike. Tor's duality is on full display this week. Internet users in Turkey are moving heavily to Tor as they seek to circumvent their government's blocking of social media services and its implementation of stronger online censorship. On the other hand, Operation Hyperion, a multinational police takedown of Tor-enabled black markets, has shown the less savory uses to which the anonymizing network may be put. And congratulations to the Five Eyes and Europol, which ran Operation Hyperion. The criminal dark web markets they shuttered were selling not only illicit drugs, but counterfeit items, toxins, fraudulent identities and the documents to go with them, and credit card data. They also offered an array of nasty services, including hacking, contract killing, and money laundering. The fraud campaign directed against customers of the UK's Tesco Bank remains under investigation. The bank suspended much online account access but permitted continued access to pay cards and ATMs, which suggests to some the fraud may have been an inside job as opposed to an external hack. Tesco also hasn't referred to the incident as a hack. Estimates of the bank's exposure to litigation and regulatory penalties run as high as £1.9 billion. Whether that's a British billion or just an American billion, we don't know, but either way, that's a whole lot of pounds. Finally, Tesla Motors has been in a legal spat with one Todd Katz, formerly CFO of an oil field and pipeline services company, and for some reason a critic of Tesla. Tesla is suing Mr. Katz for impersonating Tesla founder Elon Musk in an email sent to Tesla's CFO on August 3rd of this year. Mr. Katz has now countersued. His claim is essentially that no one could have taken his impersonation seriously since it was so riddled with fractured syntax and a host of other solecisms a real email from Mr. Musk would never have committed. Thus, Tesla suffered no actual harm. So here's the message Mr. Katz acknowledges sending. Quote, "Why are you so cautious with Q34 GM guidance on call? Also, what are your thoughts on disclosing M3 res number? Pros cons from Air POV? What is your best guess as to where we actually come in on Q34 deliverables? Honest guess? No BS. Thanks for hard work prepping for today." As Naked Security reports, Mr. Katz says in his brief, quote, "Nobody who received this preposterous and grammatically deficient email ever believed it really came from Elon Musk," end quote. All we can say is, all your quarterly guidance are belong to us. Time to thank our sponsor, E8 Security, and let me ask you that question. Do you fear the unknown? Lots of people do, of course. UFOs, Men in Black, stuff like that. But we're not talking about those. We're talking about real threats, unknown unknowns that are lurking in your network. The people at E8 have a white paper on hunting the unknowns with machine learning and big data analytics that go beyond the old-school legacy signature matching and human watchstanding. Go to e8security.com/DHR and download their free white paper, Detect, Hunt, Respond. It describes a fresh approach to the old problem of recognizing and containing a threat that no one has ever seen before. The known unknowns, like alien abduction and Kang and Kodos, they're nothing compared to the unknown unknowns out there in the wild. See what E8's got to say about them. e8security.com/DHR and check out that free white paper. And we thank E8 for sponsoring our show. And joining me once again is Rick Howard. He's the CSO at Palo Alto Networks. He runs their Unit 42 threat intel team as well. Rick, you all have a new report out from Unit 42. This is called your Nigerian Threat Actor Report. Now, it's become almost a cliche, and I think we joke around the office about, I just got a letter from a Nigerian prince who wants to cut me in on the wealth. But there's more to it here. This report really digs into it.
Yeah, our Unit 42 guys have been paying attention to this because we keep seeing these attacks going against our various customers around the world. And first, we have to talk about the code name because you can't really write a white paper without giving it a cool code name. So is this classified as Silver Terrier? And you're right, it is a joke around the industry that these Nigerian fraudsters, are going to ask me for money, and we always give it to them. But what we've seen in the last couple of years that these folks have really upped their game. Okay, where typically they were really low-level cybercrime actors. They've now moved into the realm competing with other more high-end cyber criminals, out of Eastern Europe. This all started back in the 80s with the scams you were talking about, and we refer to them as like the 419 scams because in Nigeria they have a law, Section 419, that forbids this kind of thing. So that's how they kind of got the name. But now, since then, they have moved, like I said, upgraded their craft. They're using professional tools like Zeus and Dark Comet. They go after, cheap malware or free malware that they use in their own schemes. They've gone away from blanket targeting to going after very specific targeting to specific industries. We're seeing high tech and higher education, manufacturing, healthcare, and construction. The volume is steady, about 5,000 to 8,000 attacks per month. So, like I said, they've really upped their game. What's interesting about the white paper we just produced is we were able to get access to some of their social media from these fraudsters in the country. And they're not your typical people we used to think did this. They're not these little script kiddie teenager people. They're mostly in their mid-40s. They live in the southeast region of Nigeria. They're pretty well-to-do. They're educated. They don't hide for some reason. I guess it's okay to be a cyber criminal in Nigeria.
Yeah, I was going to ask, does the Nigerian government just turn a blind eye to this stuff?
I think it's kind of they wink and nod and squint at that kind of crime and kind of let it go on. I'm not an expert there. but it's interesting that they can hide in plain sight. Mm-hmm. I think what's also interesting is that they run teams. The ones in charge of these groups. They're running lower, not as technically savvy teams, but they give them very specific tasks to do. And we were able to pick all that. Here's what I love about this is that they use Facebook for their social stuff, and they don't necessarily hide that they're criminals. They don't really talk about it a lot. But they use Google Plus to do their, cyber criminal stuff. So I guess that's their covert channel, I guess. So anyway, it's a very interesting report, and you guys should all read it, and I think you will enjoy it.
All right, Rick Howard, thanks for joining us. And that's the CyberWire. Thanks to all of our sponsors who make the CyberWire possible. The CyberWire podcast is produced by Pratt Street Media. Our editor is John Petrick. Our social media editor is Jennifer Iben, and our technical editor is Chris Russell. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening.